can see the police car pulling up to my house in my rearview mirror, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is how it all falls apart. Over a fucking passbook. Over something my grandfather probably forgot about decades ago, tucked away in a desk drawer next to old tax returns and expired insurance policies. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name's Michael Patterson, and I live in Riverside, Connecticut, the kind of suburb where everybody knows your business, but nobody actually talks about it. I'm 42, work in commercial real estate, have a decent marriage to my wife Jennifer, and by all accounts, I was living a completely normal life until 3 days ago. The kind of life where the biggest problem is usually whether the HOA is going to fine us for painting the shutters the wrong shade of gray. My grandfather, Donald Patterson, passed away about 4 months ago. He was 91, sharp as a tack right up until the end, and he left behind a modest estate. Not rich by any means, a house in Stamford that needed work, some furniture, his watch collection, and piles of paperwork that nobody really wanted to deal with. My dad handled most of it, being the eldest son, but there was always stuff left over. Boxes in the basement, drawers full of documents that nobody had time to sort through. Last Saturday, I was helping Dad clean out the basement to prepare it for sale. We were throwing away old magazines, broken lamps, the usual junk that accumulates when someone lives in the same house for 50 years. I found a cardboard box shoved behind the water heater, the kind of box that's been sitting in the same spot so long, it's practically part of the foundation. Inside were old photographs, insurance documents, and about halfway through, I pulled out a passbook. A real one, the old-fashioned kind with the brown cover and the embossed gold lettering. Stamford Savings Bank, it said. I was going to toss it with the rest of the papers when something made me open it. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe some instinct told me this wasn't garbage. The account number was from 1967. The last entry was dated 1989. And when I looked at that final balance, my chest actually tightened. "Dad?" I called out. "You ever hear of grandfather having a savings account at Stamford Savings?" My father, Robert Patterson, came over with a drill in his hand. He's 68, retired from his accounting firm 3 years ago, and he's usually the kind of guy who knows where every penny of the family finances is. He looked at the passbook and squinted. "No," he said. "That's strange. I handled his finances for years. I never saw that." He took it from me and flipped through the pages. "Look at these deposits. These are substantial." That's when I realized we might be looking at something. Not something sinister exactly, but something that had been missed. Something that had been sitting in a bank vault for 35 years, untouched, probably earning interest that had compounded into something real. "We should call the bank," I said. "Find out what's in there." My father nodded, but there was something in his expression I didn't quite understand. A flicker of something, caution, maybe, or concern. The next morning, Monday, I called Stamford Savings Bank. I spent 20 minutes navigating their phone system before I got a human being on the line. I explained the situation, that my grandfather had passed away, we'd found an old passbook, and we needed to know if the account was still active. "Can you give me the account number?" the woman asked. Her voice was professional, pleasant, utterly neutral. I read it off to her, and I heard the sound of typing. The pause that followed felt longer than it probably was. "Sir," she said, and now there was a different tone in her voice. "Careful. I'm going to need to transfer you to our director. Can you hold, please?" That's the first moment I felt it. That little twist in my stomach that says something is wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, but wrong in a way you can't quite put your finger on yet. The hold music played for what felt like forever. Then a man's voice came on the line, introducing himself as Robert Chen, the branch director. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "I need to ask you some questions about how you came into possession of this passbook." "I found it in my grandfather's house," I said. "In the basement. He passed away 4 months ago. My father and I were cleaning out the property." Another pause. I could hear him breathing. "Mr. Patterson, I'm going to be very direct with you. That account has been flagged for several years. The balance is significant, and there are some irregularities in the account history that have made us cautious about who accesses it. Before I can discuss anything further, I need you to bring the original passbook into the bank in person. Tomorrow morning, if possible. And I think you should bring your father as well. Flagged how? I asked. What kind of irregularities? I'd prefer to discuss this in person, he said. His voice had gone very formal now. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do you have access to the original document? Yes, I have it right here. Good. Don't discuss this with anyone else, and please bring both the passbook and a valid ID. He hung up before I could ask any more questions. That's when the real feeling set in. The one that keeps you up at night. The one that makes you check your phone every 5 minutes to see if someone's trying to reach you. I called my father and told him what the director had said. That's odd, Dad said. Very odd. But I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Probably just bureaucratic caution. Banks are paranoid these days. But I could hear the uncertainty in his voice, too. And neither of us slept very well that night. The next morning, Tuesday, I drove to the bank with the passbook and a folder on my passenger seat. My father was already there when I arrived, standing outside the glass doors with his hands in his pockets, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. We walked in together, and within a minute we were being escorted to the back office by a young woman with a name tag that said Ashley. Robert Chen stood up when we entered his office. He was in his 50s, wearing a navy suit, and his expression was exactly what you'd see on someone's face right before they deliver bad news. He gestured for us to sit. "Thank you for coming in," he said. "I appreciate your promptness. I have to tell you, in 30 years of working in banking, this situation is unusual." He opened a file on his desk, and I could see it was thick. Very thick. "Your grandfather," he said, looking at my father, "opened this account in 1967 with an initial deposit of $5,000. That was a significant sum at the time. Over the next 22 years, he made periodic deposits. The account grew substantially. The last transaction was in 1989, a withdrawal of $10,000. After that, the account went dormant." He paused, letting that sink in. "What we discovered, when I pulled the file this morning, is that the account has been receiving automatic interest deposits every quarter for the past 35 years. The current balance is approximately $473,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father made a sound like he'd been hit. "However," Chen continued, "there's a complication. According to our records, in 1991, 2 years after the last withdrawal, someone came into this bank and attempted to close the account. They claimed to be the account holder's son and presented documents that appeared to authorize them to liquidate the funds." He looked directly at my father. "That would have been you, Mr. Patterson. According to our records, you came in and tried to drain this account. You were turned away because the account holder, your father, was still living, and the bank required his signature to close it. Is that correct?" My father's face had gone completely white. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He started. "I don't remember that at all." "Well," Chen said, "that's part of why I flagged this for further investigation when your son called, because there's been a question hanging over this account for decades. Your father never came back. The account just sat there, and now your father has passed away, and you're suddenly asking about it again. I need to understand what's happening here before I allow anyone to access these funds." "Are you suggesting my father did something wrong?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "I'm not suggesting anything," Chen said carefully. "But the bank needs to protect itself, which is why, before I allow this account to be transferred or liquidated, I need to do a full audit of the situation. I'll need death certificates, proof of inheritance, and potentially a lawyer." He stood up. "I'm going to have to ask you both to leave now. I'll be contacting the probate court to determine the proper course of action. You'll hear from us within a week." We left his office in complete silence. We didn't talk in the car. We didn't talk when we got back to my house. My wife was at work, and we just sat in my kitchen, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. I never tried to close that account, my father said finally. His voice was hollow. I swear to God, Michael, I have no idea what he's talking about. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his own eyes. The question, the wondering if maybe, somehow, in 1991, he'd done something he'd forgotten about. Something that, if it turned out to be true, could destroy everything. That's when my phone rang. It was Robert Chen. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "I need you to know that I've made a report to the authorities. Given the circumstances and the timeline, I have to consider the possibility that fraud may have occurred. The police will likely want to speak with you and your father. I wanted to give you a heads up." The line went dead. And that's when I saw the police car pulling up to my house. The officers were young. Couldn't have been more than 30. One was a woman with her hair pulled back tight. The other, a guy with a notebook already in his hand. They didn't look angry exactly. They looked professional, which somehow felt worse. "Michael Patterson?" the woman asked. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Officer Sarah Mitchell. This is Officer James Garcia. We need to ask you some questions about a bank account and a passbook. Can we come inside?" My wife Jennifer had gotten home from work 15 minutes before they arrived. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face the color of old milk. My father sat at the dining room table like a man waiting for sentencing. "Of course," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone guilty. Even though I hadn't done anything. We sat in the living room. Jennifer brought coffee nobody wanted. Officer Garcia opened his notebook and clicked his pen with a sound that made my jaw clench. "Walk me through finding the passbook," Mitchell said. She was the lead. Garcia just wrote. I told them everything. The basement, the box behind the water heater, the call to the bank, the director's words about the account being flagged. I watched their faces the whole time, trying to read what they were thinking, knowing it was impossible. "Your father attempted to access this account in 1991, Garcia said. Not a question. "He says he doesn't remember that," I said. "But he doesn't deny it happened," Mitchell said. "Because he doesn't know if it did." My voice came out louder than I intended. Jennifer flinched. "He said he doesn't remember. That's not the same as denying it." My father made a small noise in his throat. "Mr. Patterson Sr., Mitchell turned to him. "Can you tell us about 1991? My father's hands were shaking. I'd never seen my father's hands shake before. He was the guy who had a spreadsheet for everything, who never raised his voice, who paid his taxes early. "I don't recall going to that bank," he said slowly. "But it was 33 years ago. I was in my 30s, busy with work. My father and I didn't have a close relationship. It's possible. I mean, if the bank says it happened, they have a record of someone presenting themselves as Donald Patterson's son," Mitchell said. "And they have a description from the teller on duty. A man in his early 30s, wearing a suit, claiming he needed to close an estate account." "A lot of men look like that," I said. "They do," Mitchell agreed. "Which is why we're not here to accuse anyone. We're here to understand what happened. Because right now, we have a situation where someone tried to access a significant amount of money, $473,000, under false pretenses. The bank didn't allow it. And now, decades later, the account is still sitting there, and the family suddenly wants to know about it." The room went absolutely silent. "You think we're trying to steal from ourselves?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I think," Garcia said, still writing, "that we need to figure out if there was fraud committed in 1991. And if there was, we need to know who committed it." "My father didn't commit fraud," I said. "Maybe not," Mitchell said, "but someone went to that bank pretending to be authorized to liquidate your grandfather's account. That's fraud, Mr. Patterson. That's a crime. And we need to know who did it." She closed her notebook slightly, a gesture that was supposed to seem casual, but felt like a gun being cocked. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to the bank manager. We're going to look at whatever records they have from 1991. Security footage if it exists, documents, anything. and we're going to do a full investigation. Until that's complete, I'd recommend you both get a lawyer." "A lawyer?" I heard Jennifer make a sound behind me. "For what? What did they do?" "Nobody's saying they did anything," Mitchell said, "but it's standard advice when someone's being questioned in connection with a potential fraud case." After they left, the house felt smaller. The air felt different, like something invisible had settled into the walls and the furniture and wouldn't leave. Jennifer sat down next to me on the couch, not touching me, not quite looking at me either. "Tell me what's happening," she said quietly. "I don't know," I said. And that was the worst part. I really didn't know. My father called his lawyer, a guy named Martin Steinberg, who'd handled his divorce from my mother 20 years ago. Martin said to come by his office the next morning. He said not to answer any more questions from the police without him present. He said the police would probably get a warrant to look at my father's financial records from the early 90s. "Why would they need his financial records?" I asked. "To see if he had motive," Martin said. "To see if he was having money problems. To see if maybe he tried to get into his father's account because he needed cash." My father's face went even whiter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Jennifer, who was pretending to sleep but was definitely awake. I kept thinking about 1991. My grandfather would have been 71 that year. My father would have been in his mid-30s, established in his career, doing well. Why would he have gone to a bank and tried to steal from his own father? Unless he didn't. Unless someone else went to that bank and used my father's name. But who would do that? Who would have access to that information? At 3 in the morning, I got out of bed. I went downstairs and opened my laptop. I started searching for the teller who had been at Stamford Savings in 1991. The bank had been open then, but it had been bought by a larger corporation in 2003. The records from that era would be in a database somewhere, but not online. I was sitting there in the dark of my kitchen when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop looking! You don't know what you're doing." I stared at it for a long time. Then I called it back. The number was disconnected. I showed it to Jennifer when she came downstairs at 6 in the morning, finding me still there. "That's a threat," she whispered. "I don't know what it is," I said, "but someone doesn't want me digging into this." And that's when I realized this wasn't about my grandfather's account anymore. This was about something someone had been hiding for 33 years. And now that we'd found the passbook, now that we'd opened that door, someone wanted us to close it back up. The question was, who? And what exactly were they protecting? I looked at the text again. My hands were shaking worse than my father's had been. Finalne chast. I drove to Martin Steinberg's office in downtown Stamford the next morning alone. My father had called in sick to his retirement, which was ridiculous because you can't get sicker than terrified. Jennifer had gone to work with dark circles under her eyes, both of us pretending everything was normal, both of us failing at it completely. Martin's office was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days. He was in his 70s, silver-haired, with reading glasses on a chain around his neck. He'd handled my parents' divorce, and he had that particular kind of calm that comes from having seen every way a family can fall apart. "Show me the text," he said after I'd explained everything. I pulled up my phone. He read it twice, then set it down carefully. "This changes things," he said. "This isn't just a bank inquiry anymore. This is intimidation. This is someone trying to obstruct an investigation." "Who would do that?" I asked. "Who would have access to that kind of information?" "That's the question," Martin said. He stood up and walked to his window, which overlooked a parking lot. "Your grandfather opened the account in 1967. Your father allegedly tried to access it in 1991. Then nothing for 33 years. Until you find a passbook and call the bank." He turned back to me. "Someone benefited from that account staying hidden. Someone who maybe thought it was forgotten. And now they're scared." "But my father didn't even remember trying to access it," I said. "Didn't remember, or doesn't want to remember?" Martin asked. Not unkindly. Just like a lawyer asking the question everyone was thinking. $473,000 is a lot of money to forget about. The bottom of my stomach dropped. You think my father is lying? I think, Martin said carefully, that I need to prepare for the possibility that he is. And I need to prepare for the possibility that someone else tried to access that account using his name. Either way, we need to get ahead of this. He made a phone call right there, to a detective he knew named Tom Russo, who worked with financial crimes. They had lunch together apparently, every other month. Russo said he'd pull the bank records from 1991 and see what he could find. He also said that the anonymous text was serious, that I should file a police report documenting it. So I did. I went to the Riverside police station and filed a report about the text message. Officer Mitchell took it seriously. She wrote it all down, asked if I had enemies, if anyone had threatened me before. I said no to everything. She told me to keep documenting anything suspicious and to be careful about my routine. Not to advertise when I'd be home alone. That was Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was Tom Russo, the detective Martin had called. He had a thick accent, Bronx maybe, and he spoke like a guy who didn't waste words. Your grandfather's account, he said. The person who tried to access it in 1991? It wasn't your father. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. We got the old security footage from the bank. It's grainy as hell, but we had the tech guys clean it up. The man who came in asking about closing the account? We ran facial recognition on him. He comes up as Richard Kessler. Ring any bells? No, I said. No bells. He's dead, Russo continued. Died in 2003. Car accident. But before that, he worked as a financial advisor. Specifically, he worked with elderly clients. And specifically, he worked with your grandfather for about 5 years in the late 80s. The room tilted slightly. He stole from him, I whispered. We think so, Russo said. We can't prove it now because he's dead, but yeah. We think he somehow got his hands on your grandfather's passbook information, went to the bank, and tried to drain the account. The teller got suspicious. She said something about his story not adding up, about how he was too eager, too prepared. She asked for more documentation. He left and never came back. Smart move, because if she'd called your grandfather, or if he'd had better forged documents, he probably would have gotten away with it. I sat down on the kitchen floor. So my father didn't try to steal from my grandfather, I said. No, Russo said. But here's the interesting part. Your father came in 2 days later, same bank, same teller. She remembered him because he looked like the guy from before. He was asking about his father's accounts, saying he wanted to help manage them. She got spooked, thought maybe it was the same guy coming back with a better plan. She told him she couldn't help without his father present. Your father apparently got frustrated, left, and never came back either. So that was it. My father had gone to the bank to help his aging father with his finances, had gotten turned away by a suspicious teller, and had never thought about it again. The bank had never filed a report. It was just a weird incident, until now, when it looked suspicious because of Richard Kessler's theft attempt. What about the text I got? I asked. That's trickier, Russo said. The number was a burner, used once, ditched. But here's what I think. Kessler's dead, but he had a family. He had a daughter, Linda Kessler. She's 62, lives in Stamford. She works as an accountant. And when I started digging into her father's financial history, I found something interesting. Right before he died in 2003, he set up a trust. The beneficiary? His daughter? The money in the trust? Roughly $150,000, which is not nothing, but also not where you'd expect a financial advisor to have his wealth. You think he stole from other people? I said. I think he was a predator who targeted elderly clients, Russo said flatly. And I think his daughter might have known about it. I think she might have been helping him. And I think when you started asking questions about your grandfather's account, someone, maybe Linda, maybe someone else, got nervous. I asked him if he could prove it. He said probably not after all this time. The statute of limitations had run out decades ago, Kessler was dead. And without a concrete threat, he couldn't bring charges against Linda based on a text message alone. But, he said, I can talk to her. I can let her know that we know what happened. And I can tell her that if anyone else gets a threatening message, we'll take it very seriously indeed. He said he'd contact me after he'd had that conversation. I spent the rest of Wednesday in a state of suspended animation. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I looked at commercial real estate listings. None of it was real. The real thing was waiting for Tom Russo to do something that would either confirm our nightmare or finally end it. He called Thursday morning. She lawyered up immediately, Russo said. Won't talk to me directly, but her attorney issued a statement saying she had nothing to do with any text message, that she's the victim of a witch hunt, and that if we contact her again without a warrant, she'll file a harassment complaint. So she did it, I said. I think so, Russo said, but I can't prove it. However, here's what I can do. I can make sure the bank knows about her father's history. I can make sure they know that there's a connection between her and the account. And I can make absolutely certain that if anything else happens, if you get another text, another call, anything, we file charges for harassment and intimidation. He paused. I also called Robert Chen at the bank, Russo continued. I told him the situation. I told him that his bank is about to inherit $473,000 in a dispute between two families, and that one of those families is probably connected to a long-dead fraud artist. I told him that the Patterson family, your family, didn't do anything wrong. I told him that your grandfather was the victim here, not a perpetrator. What did he say? I asked. He said, Russo replied, that he would expedite the probate process and release the funds to your father as the rightful heir within 30 days. I actually laughed. A real laugh. The first one in days. My father cried when I told him. Not sad tears. Relief tears, kind that come when you realize you're not crazy, you're not guilty, and you don't have to spend the rest of your life wondering if you did something you couldn't remember. The police issued a statement to Linda Kessler's attorney, making it clear that any further contact with my family would result in criminal charges. Tom Russo sent me a copy of the 1991 security footage. It was grainy and unclear, but you could see a man in a suit, nervous, talking to a young woman in a bank teller's uniform. You could see him leave, defeated. That man was Richard Kessler, a thief who had lived in Stamford for 40 years, who had stolen from elderly people, and whose daughter had apparently tried to keep his crimes hidden by intimidating the family of one of his victims. 30 days later, almost to the hour, the $473,000 was transferred to my father's account. He didn't touch it for a week. He just kept logging in and staring at the balance, like it might disappear. When he finally moved it, he called me. I'm splitting it, he said. Half to you, half to your sister. Your grandfather would have wanted that. Dad, you don't have to. He also wanted me to set up a scholarship, my father continued, in his name, at the university, for students who are first-generation college students. I'm doing that too. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. And I'm going to find out if there are other people, he said. If Richard Kessler stole from other elderly clients, I'm going to try to help them get their money back. So that's what he did. With Tom Russo's help, my father tracked down 5 other families who had lost money to Kessler over the years. Some accounts had been drained completely. Others, like my grandfather's, had been missed. In the end, he helped recover nearly $2 million that had been sitting in forgotten accounts, earning interest, waiting for someone to care enough to look. Linda Kessler moved to Florida. I heard through the grapevine Jennifer's sister's friend knew someone, that she'd taken a job with a small accounting firm in Tampa. I never saw her. I never heard from her again, but I know she knows that we know. As for the passbook, I had it framed. It sits in my office now, next to a photo of my grandfather as a young man in his Navy uniform. Every time I look at it, I remember that moment in my basement when I almost threw it away. I remember thinking it was garbage. I remember the weight of $473,000 in my hands, a fortune that almost stayed buried. My wife and I used part of my inheritance to renovate our kitchen. My sister used hers as a down payment on a condo. My father established the scholarship, and we all, in our different ways, learned something about the past and how it never really stays buried. It just waits for someone to find it. Sometimes late at night, I think about that anonymous text. Stop looking. You don't know what you're doing. But I did know what I was doing. I was finding the truth. And sometimes, the truth is worth every sleepless night it costs you.